What's up, football heads? Welcome back to that show. As always, I'm your host, Kyle McQueen. We got a stacked episode today. I'm very excited about this episode. I'm gonna have a rant later that I'm part of me's proud of it, and the other part I'm just excited to do it. But stacked episode. We're gonna do a Thursday night football recap. Bengals, Ravens lived up to the hype. I feel like we've been given so many shitty Thursday night football games. It's always nice to get like a legit classic. Uh, I want to go back to last Thursday with the Jets and the Texans and take a look at just the general idea of what is a catch, because there was a couple great catches, a couple non-catches in that game. The previous week there was a ton of like in between things, and just in a general standpoint, examine how insane the catch rules really are in this league that they still have not like clarified or made sense of in any capacity. I'm gonna give out another Captain Knauer Good Guy Villain of the Week award and bring back another segment that's fun, mainly because of the sound bites that I get to use. And I teased this in an earlier episode. We are going to crown their ass. We're going to crown the Chiefs, and that's going to spawn a larger discussion that I'm pretty excited about. But Thursday night football, Bengals, Ravens, black and blue division, AFC North matchup. Like, yeah, the Bengals are under 500, but if they win, then they're back to 500. Ravens, still a half game behind the Steelers, but if they win, Steelers got a tough game this weekend. They could get back on top. Most people probably in their top 3 to 5 contenders in the league right now. In Lamar, another MVP type season. It's a shame for him that Josh Allen is the MVP, and I stand by it. But Derrick Henry, King Henry, excuse me, His Royal Highness, doing what King Henry, His Royal Highness, does. Zay Flowers, at least coming into this week, was top 5 in receiving yards. So they got a lot going on. They trade for Deontay Johnson. Defense, as always, at the very least, good. They got room to grow, but they got a bunch of playmakers. Um, so this shaped up to be a good game. I said in my quick bite that went out on YouTube and Instagram that I picked the Bengals, even though I said earlier in the week that they are a tease and not a threat. And that was me giving myself a way to be right about something. And so I stand here still right that the Bengals are more of a tease than a threat. But I did get the game wrong. The refs gave the Bengals the game there or gave the Ravens the game there at the end. Um, I'm not mad about it. I like the Ravens. Loved the uniforms, by the way. But it in masked in what was a tremendous game to watch. Just if you're a fan of football, you're not a fan of either one of these teams, or if you are a fan of either one of these teams, it's just a fun, exciting football game to watch. You had to love it. But I think beneath all that excitement is the reality that both these teams are still who we thought they were. And for me, the Bengals are more of a tease than they are a threat in the AFC. Their defense is terrible, and the run game can be solid, can be marginal, depends on the opponent, but it's really just, especially with T. Higgins hurt, it's Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And obviously, Jamar Chase put up silly numbers yesterday, had multiple wild highlight reel, big time touchdown grabs. But at the end of the day, it still wasn't enough. It's not enough. So that is what it is. And then with the Ravens, again, like if the refs didn't miss a call there at the end on the 2 point conversion, they would have got another shot at the one if they put it in. Does Lamar go down the field? Justin Tucker hasn't necessarily been his usual self recently, so like he's not like a rock solid lock guarantee that if you're 60 yards or in, that he's going to nail it. Plenty of times, so I'm not saying that they wouldn't have got it done. I'm a massive Lamar fan. I think Lamar in general is at this point, you got to say that he's a better quarterback than Joe Burrow, and that's no shot at Joe Burrow. It's just like where you're ranking guys 1 through 4 in the league. Um, but they flirted with disaster again, and this is the problem with the Ravens: is they always flirt with disaster in the fourth quarter in games like this, and sometimes, like the Browns game, they fuck it up. Other times they get bailed out, like last night, and other times they hold on, they go down, they add some cushion, and they put the game away. And they're a team they're going to win 12 games, probably. They're going to win somewhere between 11 and 13 games in most years. Maybe you have a year Lamar might get hurt for a few games and they win 10 games or whatever. But they're going to be in the playoffs, barring like a massive injury to Lamar. They're going to be some degree of contender, whether it's a fringe contender or a top contender. They're going to be a contender. But you're always worried because they never they can't go a full season without having at least a couple of these games where they blow it in the fourth, they blow a big lead. I mean, a couple of years, I think it was a couple of years ago, it might have been last year. It was just like half their games they were blowing double digit leads deep in the second half or in the fourth quarter, and some of them they win, some of them they lose, but it's not as voluminous as it was in years past, but you see it in a lot of these games. There's been a handful of games already in the first half of the year where the Ravens they love to flirt with disaster. And I'll tie back to this when we talk about the Chiefs, but for as exciting as that game was, and for as much as you can look on either side and be encouraged, even if you're a Bengals fan, you say like this is twice now, we're right in there with the Ravens. Like, yeah, we're 4-6, but we can compete against these top teams. We got to get to a couple lesser opponents, beat a couple of them, get back to 500, try and build off of that, and do what we do in November and December, get back on track, and just get in the playoffs. If we can get hot and get into the playoffs, we can compete with these guys. Like, it's easy to say that because it's not necessarily not true, and it's easy to want that if you're a fan, certainly, or a player on the team or the coaching staff. And with the Ravens, you look at it as like, we got into a tough contest with a really good team despite their record, a top 4 quarterback in the league, and we got into a slugfest. Like I said, and this is what I meant to allude to earlier, like I said in the short bite yesterday on YouTube and Instagram, that can the Bengals slow Henry down to some degree so that the Ravens don't just run all over him the entire game and control the game flow? Can they make it a passing game? Can they make it a shootout? That gives them the best chance. And they did. And that's what happened. And they still lost. So, and again, you could talk about the refs on that 2-point conversion, certainly. Like, there's definitely a gripe there, but get in line, basically. So it's easy for a Ravens fan or the Ravens themselves to say, like, we went toe to toe with a tough team, a rival, great quarterback, got into a shootout, maybe couldn't necessarily play exactly our game, but we beat them. So we showed that we're better. And we've done it multiple times now. But at the same time, they're still flirting with disaster. You get into the playoffs against a team like the Chiefs, and you flirt with disaster, it's gonna be disaster. So like, it's still, as much as I like the Ravens, as much as I love the Ravens, and I've always had an affinity for the Ravens because I loved Ray Lewis and I loved Ed Reed, T. Sizzle, loved watching those defenses. They were a team in a different era where like you were excited to tune into Baltimore and Pittsburgh, and it's going to be 9-6, and it's just going to be two just heavyweight fighter defenses just throwing haymakers at the offenses. But as much as I love the Ravens, like I'm still deeply concerned come playoff time, come top contender time in the playoffs. They can't flirt with disaster. They need to string together enough games where they don't flirt with disaster. to feel comfortable, because it always, to me, when I watch a Ravens game, it's always looming in the back of my mind. Are the Ravens going to fuck this up somehow? So it might just be a product of the purple. But now we're going to manifest greatness and abundance for the purple teams this season. Ravens and Vikings fans, let's join hands. We'll meet each other in the Super Bowl. May the best purple win. But let's manifest abundance for the purple. So that's generally how I felt about the Thursday night game. Super exciting, but I think if you really dig into it, it kind of just underscores the boogeyman in the corner for both of these teams. So I don't think this necessarily, I mean, obviously it helps the Ravens because you get a win and it's a divisional win, but it's still like we expect the Ravens to win a bunch of games. We expect the Ravens to win 12 games. We expect the Ravens to win the division. We expect the Ravens to do things in the playoffs. It didn't do anything to help that central sort of core problem that always seems to loom with the Ravens. And the Bengals now back to 2 games under 500, 10 games into the season. Like, yeah, they're playing exciting and they're playing well on offense, I suppose. But if they can't stop anyone, then what the hell are they going to do about it? Like, you're running out of real estate. You're at 6 losses. Like, you can't afford more than maybe one other loss, and that depends on how all the other chips fall. So they're running out of runway to land this plane and get into the playoffs. And I guess since that game, there was some finicky refereeing. Like I said, on that 2-point conversion, I think Bengals fans have a legitimate gripe there. I'm going to flip that on its head. And this week's Captain Knauer Good Guy Villain of the Week award, despite me putting blame on him for that game, despite me ripping them earlier in the week about what they've done with the Vikings in their last 2 games in the last 2 weeks, I am going to give the NFL referees the Captain Knauer Good Guy Villain of the Week awards, because they are villains, make no mistake. But they did a good thing, and I've been on the record for weeks. I was ahead of everybody in the national media, all the jabronis out there that were slurping the Chiefs, didn't want to hear about anyone else, that are finally saying, Detroit, they're the best team in football. I've been saying it for a month plus. Detroit is the best team balling. I got more than a healthy amount of respect for the Detroit Lions, and I think they should be the favorites to win the Super Bowl. But the refs finally, New York finally punished Detroit's defense. I'm going to phrase this carefully, for occasionally being a dirty unit and biting the kneecaps too literally. We've seen Kirby Joseph take out multiple people with ACL tears, specifically for me, TJ Hawkinson, which he just got back, took him out late last year. He missed the first 7 games of the season for the Vikings. Glad to have him back. Welcome back, Hawk. But we've seen that. The Brian Branch hit that he got thrown out of the game for, I don't know if there's plenty of other circumstances where I would have been like, don't throw him out of the game. But in that case, I feel like Detroit, they're not a dirty team. They're not a dirty defense. They have a couple players that skew dirty. I don't think Brian Branch is one. I like Brian Branch. But there's just moments where the Dan Campbell intensity is so intense that they veer over a line a little bit. So I think the refs coming down strong on him in this case, I think it's a good move. You got to hold them accountable when they need to be held accountable. Send a message, because Dan Campbell might be a rabid dog, or appear to be a rabid dog, but there's enough going on there. There's enough control. They wouldn't be as good as they are if there wasn't a level of control, a level of method behind the madness. So he's a man who's going to be able to maintain the grit and the toughness and the intensity, but just carefully peel some things back. Because again, I'm sick of Kirby Joseph literally biting people's kneecaps and knocking them out for months at a time. So Captain Knauer, Good Guy Villain of the Week award. The NFL referees, specifically whichever crew refereed the Detroit game last week, didn't cost Detroit, obviously, but I like to see some level of accountability held here. Again, they're not a dirty team, they're not a dirty defense, but Kirby Joseph argues a dirty player. But there's just moments where they're getting a little too mad doggish, and like will have some stretches of play where they're not. It's not the controlled chaos of Dan Campbell. It's not the carefully constructed intensity that he brings. It veers off into not constructed, I guess. I mentioned this up front. What is a catch? So Garrett Wilson, the previous Thursday night against the Texans, had that great catch, the great one-handed catch in the back of the end zone, where he gets the one leg and foot down, and he's kind of coming down on his one leg. I'm doing it under the table. You can't see it, so I'll stop doing it. But in the debate where they called it not a touchdown, it got challenged, and his shin came down even though his knee hit out of bounds. And there was some thought of like, well, maybe his knee hit, but his knee hits out of bounds. But before that, his shin touches inbounds, so it's a catch. Then there was the other Garrett Wilson catch where he double tapped the same foot, what was his right foot, hit, came back up in the air, hit again, landed out of bounds, but that's not a catch. And then you have, and this is just in general, I don't have any like specific recent examples, but the times when someone, toe drag swag, you catch the ball and you're dragging the toe of the back foot as you're going out of bounds, and or the times when like it just taps down on the ground as they're going out of bounds, and that's a catch. You just get the tip of your toe dragging, or the tip of your toe taps it. But then you have a situation where a guy will catch it, and as he's catching, his foot's coming down, and his heel lands inbounds, and then the toe lands out of bounds, but that's not a catch, even though the heel lands first. Now, we saw before that you don't need the whole foot because just the toe is tapping or dragging, and that counts. We've also seen that the shin can land, and even though the knee hits out of bounds, if the shin touches inbounds first, it's a catch. So if you got one foot in and the other foot comes down and the heel lands inbounds, should that not be in that instant a catch? And then once the toe and the rest of the foot land, and however much of that is out of bounds, it doesn't matter because you already established one foot's in, the other heel is in, and we've established with the toe drag, you don't need the whole foot in to count as a foot. So once the heel hits, and we've established that the shin can hit, and it counts as a catch, even though the knee then comes down out of bounds in the same sort of motion, then why is the heel coming down and then the toe coming down after that out of bounds? Why is that not a catch? I don't understand it. Make it make sense. I also think the double foot tap should be a catch. Like, there's a level of skill involved there, and it's 2 feet. You got to get 2 feet down. That's 2 feet. It's a foot twice. 2 feet. Maybe in the rule book it says both feet have to come down in bounds, possibly, but it's always said, the receiver got 2 feet down. The receiver did not get 2 feet down. If you get the same foot down, if you get a foot down and it comes off and then you get it down again, I think that should count. That's skillful to do that. And if it happens by accident, well, sometimes people get the second foot in by accident, the way they're rotating, or get hit and it lands. So I don't know. I just think some of this stuff is silly. Some of it's nonsensical, and they need to figure it out. Now I want to get to, we're going to crown their ass.
If you want to crown them, then crown their ass.
The Kansas City Chiefs We're crowning their ass. Fuck it. It's time. I know it's frustrating. I know that they get the benefit of all these calls. And if you breathe on Mahomes, it's 15 yards. And if they're driving at the end of the game, they're going to get the flag that benefits them, or the other team's going to get a flag or not get a flag that knocks them back. I know it feels like all attention's on them, and they got Taylor Swift, and the league won't shut up about it, and which I have no problem with it, but the league won't shut up about it, and they get all the calls, and they got all the commercials, and it just feels like everything is done in the Chiefs' favor, and we're sick of it. And I'll say this: I jumped ship, and I said fuck it. When it has nothing to do with the Vikings, or when the Vikings are out of it, I'm gonna be a Patriots fan. I'm gonna root for Tom Brady. I'm gonna root for Bill Belichick because I'm tired of being mad at him. I was rooting for the Panthers in that Super Bowl in January or February of 2004, and it was heartbreaking. And they came back the next year, and they played the Eagles, and I hate the Eagles, so I rooted for the Pats, and they won, and I felt happy, and I was like, wow, this feels great. It feels great to root for a champion. These guys win all the time. I need to start rooting for this team. They then, from 2004 on, went a decade without winning a championship. So, Boston sports fans, you could probably blame me for after that third Super Bowl in 4 years being like, I got to root for the Pats. And then I cursed them for 10 years. But it's a good run for a curse. The curse of McQueen kept the Pats away for 10 years, and all it took was not, I'm not going to go down that road. You don't want to hear that story. But we're at that point with the Chiefs where it's like you're gonna be angry less if you embrace the greatness than if you fight it and resist it, because they're gonna frustrate you and anger you more often than not, even if they don't win another championship for 10 years. But either way, you got to look past the refs. You got to look past the league and the Taylor Swifts and all that stuff, and just Patrick Mahomes and the Netflix documentary and all that shit, and just look at them for what they do. What do they do better than anybody else? And like young up and coming teams, I think should be looking at the Chiefs as a model for this, because like young up and coming teams need to learn how to win. There's some bad teams out there that have talent that don't know how to win. And it feels like the Chiefs don't know how to lose. And it's because they're so good at knowing how to win. Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes understand the game at a transcendent level the way that Bill Belichick and Tom Brady understood the game. That nobody else in the league is even close to this. And this is why I would hire Bill Belichick in a heartbeat, because as curmudgeon-y as he is, as much as you can complain about the Patriot way and how he went about his business, when you get to the preparation and you get to the football game, Bill Belichick understands the game on a completely different level than every other coach in the league. To win football games, you're playing four-dimensional chess. You win football games. Good coaches, good teams, really good coaches, really good teams win. Even great teams and great coaches and great quarterbacks win by being so talented and so good and so in the flow and rhythm that they can, it seems, bend the game to their will. They can play, as they say, you want to play your game. You want to force the other team to play your game. You want to control the game flow. You want to control how the game turns out. But the top all-time tier, the Tom Brady's, Joe Montana's, Peyton Manning, Patrick Mahomes, the Bill Belichick's, the Andy Reid's, the Bill Walsh's, the all-time coaches understand that you can't do that all the time. There will be games. There's times when the game is its own beast, and it's going to do what it wants to do. And you have to adjust to the game that you're playing sometimes instead of trying to adjust to regain control. Maybe the game goes awry in the first half and you're trying to adjust to regain control of the game. Sometimes that works, but there's other times where the game is just it's a different animal. We've all watched football games where it just feels like this game is out of control. I mean, shit, the Vikings Colts Sunday night football game last week, the first half, it felt like one of those games. First two drives, both teams go right down the field. They both turn it over at, in, or around the red zone. And then, like, we just kept moving the ball, and there would just be a turnover, and the ball would just bounce somewhere. Sam Darnold gets sacked, and he's holding the ball, and somehow in the process, the guy's hand comes down off his face, and just the ball pops out, bounces right to Kenny Moore, runs it in for a touchdown. Or the Vikings Colts game from 2 years ago, the biggest comeback of all time. That game was its own beast. No matter what, the Vikings kept, they never got down. They kept like digging in. All right, we're going to start on this drive and we're going to move the rock. And until that game decided that the Vikings were allowed to score, no matter what they did, no matter what their mentality was, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't get anything going. But what they did is they just kept trusting the process. They kept going back to it. They didn't get discouraged. And then finally the game said, all right, we'll let you score. Yeah, we'll let you score again. And can you get it done? But the Colts were not in control of that game when they were up 33-0. The Vikings were not in control by the end of the game. The game was in control of itself. It was a different beast. And so instead of adjusting to regain control of the game, sometimes you have to adjust to the game that's unfolding. The game is bigger than the teams playing at times. Nobody's in control of it. Some games, they're like wild Mustangs where they're meant to be broken in. Like you can get on the Mustang and it's going to take a while, but you break it in and then it rides to your command. And other games are like bull rides. You're going to get on, you have absolutely no control. All you can do is just try and hold on, go with the flow, and outlast your opponent. Because the game is wild and you can't control it. You can only ride it. And Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, like Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, they understand this. They understand, like, the Bucks. With Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, I was going to pick them. I had been circling the game for weeks. Then those guys go down. I thought the Bucks had no chance. But they had a chance. And they had the ball and they scored a touchdown. And if they had gone for two, they could have had the lead. But even if they had gone for two and they had the lead, there was like 30-some seconds left. Way too much time. We saw what the Chiefs did to the Bills a few years ago in the playoffs. They what was it, 16 seconds? And they go all the way down the field. It's insane. Like you to beat the Chiefs, you have to play the game, whether it's a game that that you've been able to bend to your will, or it's a game that you just have to like perceive and feel the vibe of how this game is going and just call the game to go with the flow that the game is imposing on both teams. Whichever one of those two it is, to beat the Chiefs, you got to see ahead. You got to play the 4D chess of like going with the flow with this play, that play, this strategy, that scheme, or be imposing your will on the game to have a level of control to massage the game to get to the point where you have the lead and the ball with 10 seconds or less on the clock and they have no timeouts left, or you have the ball 10 seconds or less on the clock, they have no timeouts, and you're going in to score. Or if they have timeouts, you got to be getting ready to go up by more than 3 points. Because Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid have 10 seconds to get into Harrison Butker field goal range. Like, that's light work for them. Doesn't mean they're always going to do it, but it feels like they're always going to do it. Like, they haven't lost a game for a reason, because they know, they understand the specific singular game that they're playing. It's not like any other football game that exists. It's this game. This is the only game you need to win. You're not trying to win every football game of all time. You're trying to win under the specific conditions, the specific game flow of this game that you're playing. And nobody understands that better than they do. And that's why they win all these games, because they ain't playing to win a football. They're not playing to win a football game. They're playing to win this football game. And they know all of the details and the intricacies, and they have a deep understanding of this football game. Not just football or football games or a football game, this football game. And not enough teams, I don't think, have a good grasp on that. And I'm not saying I could step in there. If I coached an NFL team, we'd go 0-17 for sure. And I would probably have a mental breakdown, and I would quit, and I would still get paid all my money. But regardless, they understand it. They understand it at a level that Bill and Tom understood it. Other pairings in the past have understood it, but I just don't think there's anybody else in the league that truly understands it. Kyle Shanahan has been close, but he fumbles it away in the end. Now, is it because of he couldn't execute, or is it because he couldn't see the vision to get there? I don't know. There's coaches out there that have the ability to get there. And obviously Andy Reid has been around for decades. Bill Belichick has been around for decades. So it takes time. But they understand the 4D chess that you're playing to see the entire scope of the game based on the factors that have presented themselves in this unique game. They can look ahead and they can see, all right, this is how it's going to play out. We got to do the right things. This seems like the best potential way for our team to win this game. So we got to play it out to get to that scenario, because then we know what we got to do to execute. And I'm telling you, to beat the Chiefs, you got to have the lead and have the ball with 10 seconds left, or you got to be going in to score to take the lead with 10 seconds left, and they got no timeouts, or you're going up by more than a field goal. Because any other scenario, like I get why Todd Bowles, I mean, you see last night with the Bengals, I get why Todd Bowles did not go for the 2-point conversion. But then you're betting on, okay, we got the touchdown. We're going to win the coin flip, because if you lose the coin flip and the Chiefs get the ball, they're going to score in overtime. Like, it's going to happen. You have to operate under that belief, because it's going to happen more often than not. So you're betting, we got this touchdown. We're going to hit the extra point. We're going to win the coin toss. We're going to go down the field again after we just went down the field and scored on a top-tier Chiefs defense. We're going to go down the field and score another touchdown on this Chiefs defense and win the game. You're betting on all those things to happen. And if you don't, maybe you get a field goal. Well, guess what? The Chiefs are going to go down and get a touchdown, and they're going to beat you. Or you lose the coin toss. Guess what? The Chiefs are going to go down and get a touchdown and beat you. You leave 36 seconds left or whatever it was. Guess what? The Chiefs are going to go down, kick a field goal, and beat you. But at least you put yourself in a position with the lead. They should have bled more clock. They should have got the touchdown, went for 2. Nobody was expecting them to win this game on the road, missing their top 2 receivers. You got to just go for it. You have to put yourself in a position to dagger the Chiefs at the exact last moment. Otherwise, they're still alive. And then the knife is in their hands. And they're ruthless. And they're going to stab you to death. You need to bleed the clock down, get it inside 10 seconds, have the lead, and plunge the dagger into their throats. That is the only way that you are going to beat the Chiefs. At least there might be a random weird game here or there throughout the season, but in the playoffs, when it counts, when it matters, in the playoffs, in the Super Bowl, that is the only way you're going to beat the Chiefs. You have to play 4-dimensional chess. You have to understand that these games are singular occurrences, and some of them are going to impose their will as this disembodied thing on you and the other team. Look at the Vikings and Raiders last year. It was 3-0. Neither one of these teams is a top-tier defense. Both of them probably better offenses than defenses at that point in the season. But it was 3-0. It's not because both teams just decided we're going to play this defensive struggle and grind it out. It's because the game, for whatever weird reason, on that day, on that Sunday, and that afternoon, decided this is how the game flow is going to go. Just weird shit's going to happen. You got to be able to identify that and understand, particularly against the Chiefs team. I would also put Detroit in this category, that you need to beat Detroit. You need to have the ball 10 seconds or less on the clock with the lead, or be going in to score and successfully score inside 10 seconds to beat either one of those teams. You can't Mickey Mouse around. Look at the Vikings. They took a lead late against Detroit with like a minute left. And their defense played as well against Detroit as any team really has in the last like month and a half, 2 months of the season. They still gave up a bunch of points, but they didn't give up 35, 40, 50 points like everybody else has. And Green Bay obviously did a good job. They only gave up 24, but it was raining, so there's some other factors in there. So to me, I feel like those two kind of even up. The Vikings and Packers defenses did the best job on the Lions. But even still, came down. Vikings had the lead. Lions had the ball. They had a minute left. Ball in Jared Goff's hands. They went right down the field at their leisure, bled all the clock out, kicked the field goal, win the game. So maybe Detroit is learning that formula. Maybe they are. But to beat these top teams, which to me is Detroit and Kansas City, and then there's a drop-off, and then there's other teams that I would consider contenders. But to beat those top two teams, you got to play 4D chess. You got to play 4D chess, and you got to play the game that you're playing. You can't always force the game to be the game that you want it to be. You got to just play the game that you're in. You can't swim upstream. You just got to go with the flow and be able to look downstream, see the rocks and the rapids that are coming up, see the end point, and find your spot to get off on shore safely. And it better be inside 10 seconds with the lead and them having no timeouts. But that's all. I was considering, I still want to do these powerless rankings because we have this historic number of teams that are in play for the number one overall pick. But I'm going to save that for a special bonus pod. We'll keep this one short, under 40 minutes. But that crown their ass, that was fun, man. So thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. As always, like, subscribe, follow on Instagram, do all the shit, tell all the people. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And as always, take it easy, football heads, and enjoy your Sunday. Watch a lot of football. Try not to stress. There's a lot of stressful things out there. But Sunday, just sit down, grab a cold one, spark one, whatever it is you like to do. Drink a tall glass of water and just watch football all day, baby. It's beautiful.
Move it, football head!